Welcome to Ask an Expert, everyone. This is Jessa hosting tonight, and we are so lucky to be joined by Emily Holmes. And if you live anywhere in Florida or near Florida, you know Emily. She needs no introduction. And you may also recognize her name because she is now a second-time Ask an Expert guest. She also joined us. It's not many people are second-time guests, and you definitely warrant being a second-time guest. So she was, if you look back to episode 84, Emily spoke to Amanda Chance, who was hosting, about show organizing. And since then, Emily's had a very busy and productive year because since then, she has also added the role of technical delegate to her kind of resume. And so many people have requested that we speak to a show official and specifically a technical delegate. So this will be a juicy episode, and there's no one that I would rather dive into it with than Emily. Emily, I know you just got off a horse like just now. So thank you for fitting this into your schedule. I know you have a lot going on.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm happy to explain what a technical delegate is and why we're not scary and all of those things. So thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Those are all very important things. You mentioned that when we were chatting just before this, that TDs aren't scary. And it wasn't like in my conscious brain that they are, but it certainly is in my subconscious brain. Like it was a thing when I was showing that, you know, maybe just tread lightly around TDs. So this will be good to have a conversation with a TD, recognize how human and wonderful you guys are, and to learn more about the rules and what goes into being a TD. So there's lots that we'll get into. But first, will you kind of update us? Last time we spoke, like I said, you might have been event director at the Florida Horse Park. I know you were show organizing. So take us from that role to the role that you sit in today and share kind of like what your career is comprised of right now. Are you 100% TD or is it a mix?
Happy to. My role at the horse park hasn't changed that much. I run the horse trials and the schooling shows at the Florida Horse Park, and I'm a contractor, so I'm not an employee. I come in, I do the shows, I leave. It works out great for everybody. I actually got my TD license in 2021, maybe. I've had it for a while, but I've only just started to like pick up more and more things. So right now I do a lot more horse shows than I do TD. And I can kind of go into some of the questions. I'm a small R TD through USEF. So that's a USEF license where I am licensed to officiate at USEA competitions. USEA doesn't have any of their own officials. It's all through USEF. And so large R means I'm allowed to officiate through preliminary level. Small R. Large R is through intermediate, and S can go through advanced. So a lot of the times the jobs that I pick up are all smaller horse trials through preliminary. I've done 3 Lakes. I've done Majestic. I've done a couple in Virginia. I've done one in New Hampshire. So I've kind of traveled a bit, and I'm lucky because actually as a small R, I can also be assistant for the bigger shows. And so this past weekend, I was at Rocking Horse as assistant TD to Karen Wynn, who's one of, between her and Gail Fox, they're 2 women that both have all of their FEI licenses and all of their USEF licenses for judging and technical delegate. And they're incredibly intelligent. They're great to work with. They have so much knowledge. And so I'm lucky that I get to work with people like that and learn from them. I'm TDing right now, like maybe 1 weekend a month, 2 in March, and it's starting to pick up. So I'm actually going to Rocking Horse in 2 weeks for the continuing education session to work on upgrading my license to a large R so that I can officiate through intermediate. And hopefully I'll be testing in October for that. So fingers crossed, but I'm still a baby.
Okay, so you said there's small R, large R, and then S.
Yeah.
Is that like, does that align with the licensure of dressage judges or like course designers? It sounds like familiar lettering. And is it
it's all the same thing? Yeah. Okay. So like For our show jumping, we only go through large R. They've been talking about changing that around, adding different licenses and stuff, but there's not really a huge need for it yet, a huge demand. It'd be great if there were. But yeah, so it's the same for dressage. Small R's are licensed through, I believe, 4th level, large R through I1 or I2. I can't remember. Don't quote me on this. And then Grand Prix, you have to have an S.
Okay. So the letters carry over. Yep. And you mentioned that your USEF license grants you the ability to be a TD at USEA shows. Does that mean that USEA does not have its own rule book? The USEF has the rule book.
Correct. Yep.
And FEI is totally separate.
That's a whole different license. Yeah.
Okay.
As a TD, I can't get my FEI license until I'm a large R. So I'll start working on that too. If I pass my test in October.
So does FEI have its own rule book, or is that?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So that's a whole new ball game, but we'll kind of keep our conversation within USEF and USEA, but that's good to know. And when we first said hello, you mentioned you can talk about what a TD is. Let's start there. What's a TD?
I'm the referee. It is my job to make sure it's a level and fair playing field for everybody. And to make sure everybody follows the rules. Make sure everybody's equipment is legal, everybody's doing what they're supposed to, being safe. I know safety is a big issue right now. And kind of just being there for questions too. There's a lot of, at Rocking Horse this weekend, there's just a lot of phone calls about very basic questions that people wanted to double check, or they wanted to check a bit or a bridle or something like that. And as the TD, we're happy to be there and happy to answer those questions and help everybody.
Interesting. And what a complicated referee role, because I think about people say that it's very complicated to be a ref for football, or think about I watch tennis, being a ref for tennis. There are so many fewer variables.
That is so true.
It's really interesting just to think
about. With regards to that, we're such a volunteer sport. And, obviously I can't be everywhere at once. The president of the ground jury can't be everywhere at once. And so we really rely on knowledgeable, educated volunteers to do a lot of the jobs that we can't do the whole time, like bit check or stewarding a cross-country warm-up and making sure people are jumping safely. We really rely on the volunteers to help us.
Will you talk about the makeup of let's call it the referee group? Because I know there's a president of the ground jury. I know there's at least one TD. What's the threshold for more than one TD? And what's the difference between the TD's role and the president of the ground jury? And how do you all work together?
Sure. So president of the ground jury is basically final judgment call. Their job is to be unbiased. A lot of times president of the ground jury is judging dressage or show jumping. And then the TD is the referee. If there's an issue, if there's a question, if, there's a safety issue, then I, as the TD, would go to the president. If there's a lot of times technical eliminations, people can be technically eliminated in show jumping for missing jumps or, silly stuff like that. So then I would bring that to the president, asking if they're allowed to go cross country, stuff like that. So basically, I'm the one that gathers all the information and presents, and, we discuss and stuff, but the judgment call is always left to the president. It depends on what show you're at. FEI is a whole different ballgame, but for just a regular, Rocking Horse, you have to have a second TD when you have a minimum of 300 entries that are doing show jumping and cross country concurrently. So if show jumping and cross country are running at the same time and there's a minimum of 300 entries, there has to be a second TD. And that's a newer rule just the past couple of years. And I will say from organizing Ocala that you have to have 2 TDs for a show that size. When there's 5 dressage rings going and show jumping and cross country, it's impossible as a TD to do all of it. And so we really rely on a team. We're a group. We all show up. We all work together. We do the best that we can. A lot of times there's judgment calls. And a lot of what we talk about lately is, if there's a judgment call, like say like a beginner novice horse stopped at a ditch, it may have taken a step backwards. The jump judge doesn't remember. And while on course, they are our eyes and ears, we can't be everywhere at once. And we want to have the back of our volunteer. A lot of times too, we make the call for the benefit of the rider. The benefit of the doubt always goes to the rider is what we say every single horse show. And that's definitely taken hold in the past few years. And I think that for me as a TD, I try to be very rider friendly. And if I'm making a judgment call, I want to make sure I'm being as fair as I am to everybody that's involved in the situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you're like, we need two TDs at a show that size. I'm like, you need 10. Like it feels when I think about everything that's going on, it's incredible that you guys can get it done with two.
It's a lot sometimes.
But like you said, like having knowledgeable volunteers really helps. You mentioned judgment calls, and I'm sure I'm sure it's common for riders to maybe disagree with a call that's being made, whether it's by a volunteer or by a TD. What is a rider's response in that case? Like, is there a proper appeals process that they should go through? Is it appropriate? Will you talk about, like, let's say that they're the ones that got the 20 penalties at the ditch and they're like, my horse didn't take a step back. What is the right next step for them?
I mean, they're absolutely welcome to file inquiry, where basically they just come, they ask me questions, and that's kind of it. If they would like to continue with their questioning because they really, really, really do not agree with me, they can file a protest. And so anybody's allowed to lodge a protest. It goes directly to the president of the ground jury, and it has to be written, signed, and delivered to the event secretary. And actually it has to be accompanied with a fee. I think it's like $100 fee. And then that can be refunded if the protest is upheld. But I mean, if they really disagree with me, they have to put in quite a bit of effort to protest. Which, I mean, and if they really feel strongly, then I think they should. Absolutely.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I had no idea whether it was that formal of a process or not. But I mean, it does make a lot of sense. And even the fee to me makes sense. Like it is demanding time and resources from other people. And cool. I like that. Okay. Getting back on track. What inspired you to become a TD? Because I know it wasn't that you had a lot of free time.
No, that was not it. I've been really lucky being the organizer of the horse park to work with some really amazing TDs. And it's a job that appeals to me over judging, because I say every horse show, I could never sit in a dressage booth all day long. It's not for me. It's not my personality. I give people who can do that so much props. I don't know how. Being a TD for me, it was something I really wanted to do because I, as a person, really believe in being fair. I'm very much the type, I think a lot of people on here would agree with me, that I don't play favorites and I'm not easily swayed by how many medals a person may or may not have. To me, everybody pays the same amount of entry fee. Everybody gets a fair shot at competing. And so that being a TD definitely appealed to me. You get a little bit of travel, you get to work with different people every week, you get to go to different horse shows. And the more I do it, the more I love it.
I remember that you saying that about treating everyone equally, which is so important and feels really good as a competitor. So I commend you for that. And I'm sure that people that attend your shows, whether you're the TD or the organizer, really appreciate it. I am curious what the process of getting licensed to be a TD is. Is it crazy? Is it all virtual? How long does it take?
It is not virtual.
Okay.
It takes a while. And full disclosure, I spent about $6,000 getting my small R. And that's with people helping me, sharing hotel rooms and all of this stuff. So you have to check certain boxes before you can even apply. You have to gain X amount of points. And the points can come from organizing, being on an organizing committee, having a different license. Maybe you're like a dressage TD, and riding. Obviously, the higher you've ridden, the more points you get. And so once you've checked all those boxes and you have like, I think it's 10 points total, then you can basically start a checklist on your USEF dashboard, and you start apprenticing. I think for a small R, you actually have to attend the training seminar before you're allowed to apprentice. And that was great. I did that at Sporting Days. It was taught by Gretchen Butts, Sue Smithson, and John Williams. And I learned so much. I loved it. It's great to work with other people that are also trying to become a TD or a judge, and it's super educational. But once you go through the training program, then you have to apprentice. And for a small R, you had to apprentice 4 times under different preceptors. There's people that are chosen as preceptors you can work with. And you have to be there, a couple days before. You have to be out measuring all the fences, because all cross-country fences get measured before 3 p.m., the day before the show. And the apprenticeships, I learned so much. I did a couple at Chat, one at Rocking Horse. I went to Virginia. And once you go through all of that, then you go to your testing. And I tested at 5 points. And you are tested. There's people firing questions at you and asking you to make judgment calls. And you have Mark Phillips asking you questions about cross country, and you're like, oh man, I hope I know the answer. And someone just asked what's a small R. It's I explained it earlier in the episode, but small R, I'm allowed to technical delegate TD through preliminary level. And so the testing was pretty intense. You find out right when you leave whether or not you pass, but then you have to wait for it to go to the USEF board and all of this stuff. And you have to it's like 4 months later, you get approved for your license. And then you have to go beg for jobs. So it's not easy. It's a lot of hours. It's a lot of travel. It's a lot of studying the rule book. And to me, it's really, really rewarding. And I recommend that people do it. We need more of them. And there's quite a few people coming through. And I know I've pushed a couple of my friends into getting their license, and they haven't yet, but I'll keep pushing, because I think they would be good. I would think they would be, I think they would be good judges or good TDs. And so it's a good way to be out in the community and give back. I still have yet to see any ROI on what I spent getting my license. So
I bet that is, I'm guessing too, those apprenticeships, those are unpaid, right?
Oh, 100%.
So that's a lot of
you have to ask
travel.
Permission from the organizer to be there and stuff like that. And yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. And then once you are licensed, whether regardless of the level that you're licensed at, is there a career path being a TD in and of itself, or is it more like this is a kind of like you work it into your career in other equestrian endeavors?
Yeah, you definitely once you get a higher license, you get hired more, right? There's a lot more competitions that offer the intermediate level that, that are around here, right? Around Florida. And then, once you have your S, you can do any competition at all. And so those are pretty popular people to hire as well, because you never have to worry. And so, as a small R, I think it'd be pretty difficult to make a living doing this. As a large R or as an S, there are lots of people out there that do it.
Interesting. Okay, great. Mm-hmm. Well, if anybody's interested in becoming a TD, it seems like Emily would cheer you on and be a great resource.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I won't call out names in here, but you know who you are.
Yeah, I could probably guess who some of those people are. On the last episode, when you were talking about being a show organizer, you talked about a day in the life of Emily Holmes as a show organizer on a competition day. And you even included things like stopping at Dunkin' Donuts for donuts for the whole crew. And I loved that.
Yep.
Will you describe a day in the life of Emily Holmes as a TD on a competition day?
Yeah, it really depends on the competition and the competition day. But for instance, if it's like, a 1 day or, a small horse trials over 2 days, I get there at 7. I'd like to get there. You have to really be there before the competition starts. Check in at the office, make sure everything's good to go for them. Make sure, check radios, check on our volunteer status, and kind of make sure that everything is in place for every phase. And then I like to hang out at dressage, bit check, warm up for a while, make sure the volunteers are good to go over the rules with them. There's new rules this year for bits and bridles and stuff. And anybody on here that competes, I highly encourage you to go read the rule book, because the bit annex and the bridle annex are completely different for this year. And now we're mostly referring to FEI rules, which a few people also learned at Rocking Horse this past weekend. But I like to make sure that they're comfortable, they're good to go. They, know how to communicate with the judges, know how to communicate with the announcer. A lot of times once they get going, I like to just step back and observe and make sure everybody's comfortable. Like, I'm close enough that I'm there if they need me, but a lot of times they're off and rolling, and, our volunteers are experienced most of the time. And so they're good to go. And, I check on the judges and make sure they have everything that they need. I check and make sure the rings are, all the letters are in the right place. That's happened a few times, that the rings are the right size. That happens quite frequently at my own shows too. It's just something that gets overlooked. And then if show jumping's next, you go, make sure you've walked the course the day before with the designer if they're there, with the president for sure. Course has been approved. So you're just checking now on volunteers and warm up and making sure that the jumps in warm up are legal and there's safety cups on the oxers and all of that jazz. Maps are posted, and, once it gets up and going, that, people are getting in and out of the ring quickly. And, then on to cross country. So the TD's job is to give a jump judge briefing before all the volunteers go out on cross country day. And it's basically trying to explain all of the rules on cross country that a volunteer needs to know in like 20 minutes. And it's so much information. I oftentimes feel bad for the volunteers, because it is, if they've not done it before, it is so much to try and understand. And a lot of people feel pressure. They don't want to make the wrong call and stuff like that. And once you get the jump judge briefing, they're sent out. I like to go fence to fence to fence and chat with them one-on-one. Hey, do you have any questions about your fence? Do you feel comfortable with what you're doing? Is there anything that I can help you with? If there's frangible fences on course or a MIM table, I spend more time with those jump judges. This is what happens when it falls. This is what you do. Don't panic. We're there for you. All of that stuff. Combinations, A, B, A, B, C, A, B, C, D, whatever. Do you have any questions? They're allowed to do this and this. They're not allowed to do this. And, something that's really important for me as a TD is making contact with all of those jump judges one-on-one, so that they know who I am. They're comfortable talking with me. And when I leave their jump, I know if they have questions that they're comfortable reaching out to ask. And that's something that's really important to me, is I want everybody that I'm working with to feel comfortable asking me a question. And I think there's a lot of people out there, like I said earlier, that think that TDs are scary, and we're not. I'm a people person. If I have time, I'll sit and chat with them. I want to know why they're volunteering and stuff like that. So once cross country's up and going, basically my job is to just make sure everything stays going. If, dressage bit check has a question, I have to run there. If show jumping has a question, I run there. If, someone falls off on cross country, we have to do a fall form for every fall. Everybody has to be checked out by EMS, all of that stuff. So every day is wildly different. Something new pops up at every horse show. No matter how many I've run or been at, there's always something new. And, you know, the day winds down and the phases slowly end one by one. And, you know, then I hang around and make sure scoring is good and everything's good to go. At the end of the horse show, TDs have to do a ton of paperwork, and we have to submit a TD report to USEF. And it's usually a couple hours worth of questions that they ask us. They want to know every question you can think of about a horse show. They want to know the answer. You have to go and type in exactly how many eliminations per level, at how many fences, all of that stuff. So the job doesn't end when the show is over. A lot of times there's follow-up questions from USEF, and but yeah, every day is so wildly different.
That's incredible. And it's like I want to put a tracker on you and see how much ground you cover on a day being a TD, because it sounds like you're in, like, you know, 10 places at once, kind of like you're on to the next. And I really like that you make such an effort to be an approachable person for the volunteers, because I see why that's incredibly important for you to be as effective as you can be in your role. Similarly, when is it appropriate for a rider to approach you? And when is it not appropriate for a rider to approach you, just knowing how busy you are, you know, like, and what are you wearing? How do they identify you?
The last question is a great question. So there's always a chain of command at an event. If a rider has a question about safety, about the course, about striding, about anything like that, the first person they contact is the rider representative. And those are posted at every horse show. If the show uses event entries, the new show center will have the rider rep name and number on there on the website. And that's always your first go-to, is go to the rider rep. As a TD, I also like to be approachable. I would like for most people to go through the chain of command, because then not 300 people are calling me directly. But I think if people have a really serious question, absolutely just go to the office and say, hey, I'd like to talk to the TD. I have a question about this. I have a question about this. I mean, obviously, you're not going to have your rider rep tell you if your bit or bridle is legal or not. Don't do that. Call the TD. But for, like, you know, questions on courses and striding and stuff like that, go to the rider rep. Cross country, basically, go to the rider rep. Every TD dresses differently. We don't have a uniform. I'm always in a sun shirt and usually skinny jeans or shorts. We do have this neat little badge. I should have grabbed it. But TDs have a little badge that USEF issued us. Has the USEF logo, says Technical Delegate and our names. But our numbers are always posted as well on Show Center, and the office can always reach us too. But I have people calling me and asking me questions that the organizer should answer, but they don't know how to call the organizer, so they call me, which is fine, and I don't mind doing that. To be fair, a lot of the time, if all of the phases are going well, you're kind of sitting quiet and just waiting for something to go wrong, honestly. So, like, a lot of time there is some downtime, you know, if people have questions, but I would always rather be approached and have my time interrupted than someone scared to bother me.
Got it. Okay. But it is really helpful to know that chain of command and where to find the information to contact those people.
Yeah.
Okay. Now is the part that I have been most excited about, and I think a lot of people have been most excited about, which is diving into the rule book. Our everyone's friend, I was going to say our friend, which is true, but everyone's friend, Lauren Romanelli, made a post, I think earlier this week, that got a lot of action, as all of her posts do. I need her someday to teach me how to be
controversy.
How to cause controversy. No, how to be as effective on social media as she is. But she was basically just saying like so many people spend a lot of money to be part of these horse shows and they haven't read the rule book, which was
Nobody
just
has.
which is just like a funny observation. But it got a lot of conversation going. And there was talk of a trivia night. There was talk of a competition called Are You Smarter Than a Pony Clubber, which none of us are.
Yeah.
They know their stuff. But my hope, if you're up for it, is that we can go kind of phase by phase through what happens at a horse show and talk about rules people should know, little known rules that maybe don't come to light as often, but are kind of fun to just have in your back pocket. So first of all, are you up for that?
I have the rule book up with the search function ready.
Amazing. Which is another thing that was in that thread that Lauren posted. You shared an app. The USEF has an app of the rule book, which I had no idea.
Yep, they do.
For anybody watching the video, there's everything that you could need right there at your fingertips.
Yep, all the like your general regulation rules that apply to every USEF show. Those are the GRs, and then you can literally go division by division. But eventing, obviously, we have our own rule book. You can go in, and the cool thing about this one is it has a sweet little search bar.
Definitely need the search bar.
I use the search bar every single horse show.
I'm sure. All right, well, get ready to use it again. Can we start? Does it make sense to start at, like, are there rules about horse care that's happening at the barns in the stabling area? Does that fall under a TD, or should we start with dressage?
I think we can skip right to dressage. A lot of times with the rules about stabling and stuff is there has to be X amount of sharps containers per X amount of horses and stuff like that.
Oh, got it.
Most of the time,
falls more on a
show. If your horse has food and water and they're not trying to climb out, I'm not in stabling.
Okay, got it. Let's start with dressage, and I'll toss it to you. And will you share? Maybe just thinking of the recent shows that you've been at and what has caused issues for people, whether it's, I know you mentioned bits and bridles, rules have changed, but whether it's like an elimination or just kind of like notes that you've had to make to people to let them know, this needs to be changed if you don't want to be eliminated.
Yeah. The biggest thing lately has been bridles. So we used to have, USEF would have this annex where you could search and it would show you all the bits and bridles that are legal, blah, blah, blah. So in eventing, if you can't find a rule in the USEF rule book, then we automatically go and check the rule in the FEI rule book because we fall under FEI. So it's like FEI, USEF. And so now all of our bits and bridles and saddlery and boots and breastplates and all of that fall under mostly FEI rules. And so I encourage everybody, first of all, to please make sure your bridle has a throat latch because those have to have a throat latch. There were a few riders I caught this weekend. One is a ride IQer, and I walked up and I was like, do you know your bridle's not legal? And she was like, I was like, no, it's not. So that's actually a really, really, really big one right now with all the cool bridles coming out.
I never would have thought that a throat latch would be omitted from a bridle.
Yep. Just double check their legality because a lot of them are not legal. And the FEI rulebook is great. It has pictures. It has name brands.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. There is also an FEI TAC app where you can go in and check in eventing all of your rules and stuff for TAC.
That's really cool. Are those images of TAC that I'm seeing too? Or is it all written? Wow. That's cool.
No, it's pictures.
Good. That helps a lot.
We do best with pictures. Yeah.
In the case of like the people that you saw with bridles that were not regulation, if you catch it in warm up and they're able to switch, is it all good as long as they don't enter the dressage arena?
Absolutely. It's legal up until they go down center line.
Got it.
I mean, it's on the, the field of play, everybody has to play the same. There's certain things not allowed in warm up, and stuff like that. But for the most part, if you want to warm up without a throat latch and put one on right before you get on center line, don't recommend it, but more power to you.
Oh yeah, you have enough to do before going down center line.
Yeah.
Other than adding a throat latch, but that's good to know that it's an option.
There is actually something that came up this weekend. It's a whole new rule. But basically, when you go in the arena and you're going around it, waiting for the judge to blow the whistle.
Yes.
So while you're going around the ring, if there is a discrepancy of dress, or you have whips when they should be forbidden, like at a championship, or you're come in with bell boots and you forgot to take them off, the judge can actually stop you and tell you to take it off. And then it won't be deducted from your test. If you go in and, you have bell boots on, there's a whole lot, there's different rules about that. But, I
like that change. That's really nice.
Yeah, it's nice. And so like when you like for this instance, it was a young rider. She did her test in bell boots. The judge eliminated her, which is, at the ground jury's discretion. And the TD ended up calling the dressage judge, explaining the new rule because it just came out December 1st. And the judge said that she was happy to just put, an error, which is -2, instead of eliminating the rider. And so she got to continue in the competition. That rider then broke more rules in show jumping.
No.
That's fine. I had a chat with her and she's reading her rule book, and I'm very proud of her for that. So I think a lot of times, if I catch something like that, again, benefit of the doubt to the rider. Like I am quite positive that the majority of the people breaking the rules are just unaware.
100%.
Yeah. And it's rider responsibility to know the rule book, but not everybody can know everything. Right. And so sometimes we learn via mistakes, and I'm also one of those people. So, I encourage everybody to read the rule book, but if you don't, the TD is there to double check the rule book.
There was a question. Peter Gray was our guest last week, and he spoke to Kinsey, and I tuned in for a little bit of it. And I heard a really interesting question about whether it's allowed for your horse to have the red ribbon in its tail if they're a kicker in the ring, because that could be considered like unnecessary. I don't know what the word is, like accessories, decoration, whatever it is. Something like that. If there were like a complaint made that somebody went in the ring with the red ribbon, how would you go through that thought process?
I mean, to me, somebody putting a red ribbon in their horse's tail is actually respecting everybody else around them, because that's their only way of communicating that their horse isn't comfortable around other horses. And so that to me is something that I would actually thank the rider for being respectful of the other riders around them. And yeah, there's no rule in our rule book about it. There might be one in the GRs. I would have to go through and look, honestly, but I would be like, hey, thanks for telling everybody your horse is probably going to kick the other horse's face in.
Yeah. Let's avoid that.
Yeah. Especially at a horse trials. Like we're all there, the horse trials are down here. It's different. It's a very professional sport, but across the country, grassroots, amateurs, me, and I'm including me because I'm an amateur rider on my little homebred, and we're the majority of the sport. And so we spend a lot of money doing this, and like for me as a TD, I don't want to eliminate you for wearing bell boots in the ring because you forgot. Like that's
right. That doesn't feel good for anyone.
I will, if the ground jury says eliminate them, absolutely I will.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of the times with just a very firm warning, hey, don't do it again, people are really respectful about that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is there anything that we should talk about regarding, I think warm-ups, there's probably some similarities that cross over for all three disciplines. Is there anything else we should talk about either regarding dressage or regarding warm-up that might be good for people to know or just funny for people to know?
I have to touch on show jumping warm up because it's been such a thing lately, and it really can be a mess. We have people claiming warm up jumps, and some people aren't being able to jump enough jumps before they ride because other people won't let them use jumps, which is not in the spirit of eventing at all. We are a community. We share. We're all taught that as kids. We share with our friends. And it's starting to actually become a huge issue. And a lot of organizers are talking about adding another volunteer, or I've actually discussed adding an FBI steward to my show jumping warm up. And if you are not playing nice, you will be made to. I haven't made that call yet for my Ocala shows, but we had some of those issues in Rocking Horse this past weekend. So in terms of warm-ups, be respectful of your friends, be respectful of the other riders, be respectful of the other horses that are also sharing space you are, and share and be nice. Play nice. Is there a top secret watch list? Yes, there is.
What are some ways that you can earn a spot? That for anybody just listening, that comment just came through on Facebook. Yeah. Somebody asked if officials have amongst themselves a top secret watch list. This is Krista Wilson asking if she's on it, but tell us some ways that you could earn a spot on the watch list.
Honestly, most of the time it's dangerous riding. There's dangerous riding is very much a gray area. And in terms of safety, it's something that definitely needs to be talked about. We're taught as TDs how to identify dangerous riding, what constitutes dangerous riding versus what constitutes as bad riding. And usually to be on the watch list, you have to scare us a lot. And sometimes people are also on the watch list because they really can't follow the rules. That's pretty much it. It's not a huge list.
Not a list any of us want
to be on.
That's
to
why we're listening tonight.
To get on it.
Yeah. Okay. Show jumping warm up can be, excuse my language, but such a shit show. So can cross country warm up. And are there? I have so many questions on this. Are there any alternatives? There probably aren't, because you have to be to warm your horse up, you have to be jumping. So there's not really an alternative when it comes to jumping to being in that ring. When it comes to dressage warm up, can you warm up outside of the designated warm-up ring or no?
It depends on the organizer. So warm-up areas are supposed to be stewarded. So a lot of times warming up really just depends on the organizer, what space is allowed and what equipment they have in terms of show jumping and cross country.
So you should only be warming up in an area that has a steward, not, in a... Yeah,
and there's definitely been cases where people have come to me and said, my horse really isn't good with other horses. It's not a good idea for me to be in warm-up. Can I warm up over here? And my answer is, yeah, as long as the warm-up steward can still kind of see you and keep their eyes on you. Absolutely.
Okay. Interesting. Back to show jumping warm-up. What are some other rules that apply to show jumping warm-up that people should be aware of so that they can be practicing the etiquette that they need to be? I know, for example, the jump shouldn't be going past a certain height. There should be a variety of jumps. Talk more about that.
Yeah. So show jumping warm up, it's, you go back to the whole cross rail vertical oxer thing. It doesn't really work as much as it used to, especially with the upper levels. At Ocala, we try and put out 4 oxers so you can make whatever type of fence you want. And there's plenty of jumps for everybody. A lot of times, you don't really want the, you don't really want to be jumping your horse a whole lot before anyway, but a lot of people do. I'm going into show jumping. Rulebook says 2 adjustable oxers, 2 adjustable vertical practice fences. It definitely depends on what the organizer has in terms of space and stuff like that. Supervisors are appointed to ensure the rules are followed regarding exercising and warming up. When you're jumping the fences, you make sure the red flag is on your right and the white flag is on your left. You can't jump fences while people are holding them. You can't set up, it's different too between FEI and USEF for show jumping warm up. FEI, you can set up a one. You can't do that with USEF. There's certain rules about ground rails, and it has to be, so many inches. You're allowed to jump so many inches over your designated height. Say you're, competing novice, you're allowed to jump so many inches over novice. I actually think it's 6 centimeters, but I'd have to actually double check the rule on that.
It's not a prelim fence if you're competing novice. It's very close to like what you're going to see out there, which that's one of the things I've seen in warm up. Is there anything that comes to mind as recent? I mean, maybe even recent things that you've become aware of and having to make a call, whether it's show jumping warm up or, really any rules that might be interesting to talk about.
The rules change all the time.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have known that.
Yeah, the rules change all the time. Fun fact, if you open the rule book, all of the new rules are highlighted in red. Something that I run into a lot is jackets. People don't know about the jacket rule. You're only required to wear a jacket for intermediate and advanced. And if it's a 1 day, you don't have to. Preliminary and below, you do not have to wear a jacket at all, ever.
That's really interesting.
Yep. Same gloves are only required at intermediate and advanced. There's so many things. There's so many different rules all of the time that change. And we run into differences. For me, when I went to pull up the eventing bit annex at Rocking Horse this past weekend, I was like, here, I'm going to go have the organizer print this off. So you have all these pretty pictures. And I open it and it's just one sheet of paper. And it basically is like, refer to FEI rules. Here are the rules that are different than FEI that we have. And I'm like, what? We're human. I don't read the rule book every month. I don't know anybody that does. So a lot of times something will come up and I'll be like, oh my God, like, okay, well that changed. I'm sorry. Like, I'm pretty good at admitting when I'm wrong and when I'm sorry. And so, yeah, sometimes I'll be like, oh, sorry, that rule apparently changed. Someone just, braiding is not in the rule book, which means you don't have to do it and you can choose to if you would like to. That's probably Lauren Romanelli that just commented that. It just tells me Facebook user.
I know. It was Robin Harder. I'm
okay.
toggling between the two. It is so odd that we only see Facebook users from our side. But yes, I was seeing the braiding thing going around this week. Is when it comes to like colors that people are wearing in any of the various phases, whether it be their saddle pad or their jacket, does that come into play?
Oh, yeah. That's been a big, big, big thing lately. Because, there's all these cool tall boots that are alligator skin and, all these cool different colors. And, if you compete with improper saddlery or illegal equipment, you can get eliminated. But the officials, half the time, we can't keep up with all the new fashion trends and we're not the fashion police. So a lot of the times they put in new wording. I'm trying to find it right now, but when I was reading through the rule book yesterday for different reasons, it came under, I think, dress, and I giggled when I read it because, where is it? Oh yeah, it's in red because it's new. The ground jury has the ultimate discretion in regards to dress and equipment at events, including dress and equipment not covered within the rules or annex. The ground jury will make its best effort to make a ruling in the best spirit of the sport.
Oh my Lord.
We can't keep up. So basically, if you come to us with this like whack boot, I, as a TD, have to take it to the president of the ground jury and we will discuss whether we believe it is legal or not.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of discretion and quite.
It is a lot of discretion because it's so different depending on who you're talking to.
Can people braid with colors? Like, can they have like colored ribbon in their horses?
Yeah, that's a different USEF rule for every sport, basically. So like there's some sports in USEF that you are super restricted and there's some that you're not. Because braiding is not in our rule book.
Oh, there's just nothing there for it. So that would kind of fall under the discretion thing too, if it came to be. All right, we just had a question. Let me see who it was. It was Robin again. Thank you we love your participation, everyone who is chatting.
Yes.
Robin said, what's the rule on logo saddle pads for an amateur? That's really interesting. For instance, a saddle pad with the logo of your barn or your saddle maker.
There's not really. That would actually end up falling under FEI rules. USEF doesn't have rules about it. I don't know the amateur rules through USEF. That's probably actually in the general regulations. But for eventing, I would have to refer to FEI rules on just size of logos. It's something like, I'm going to quote the wrong number, but like 150 square centimeters or something like that.
So size is most significant, not whether they are designated as an amateur or professional.
Yeah.
Kinsey and I learned that kind of the hard way. We got a lot of saddle pads, not as competitors, but we got a lot of saddle pads embroidered. And then
the logo was too big.
Like, did you make sure that it's the right size? And it didn't even occur to us. But actually, I think that it was fine.
It's pretty big.
Yeah, it is bigger than I expected.
Yeah.
Getting somebody to correctly embroider a saddle pad, even in the Ocala area where horses are everywhere, proved to be challenging as well.
Yeah.
Okay. We have 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure we talk about safety. But that said, anybody who's attending live right now, if you have more questions about specific rules that you want to get into, please ask them in chat and we will circle back. But Emily, as both an organizer and now a technical delegate, I'm curious what your perception is about the safety of 3-day eventing and what direction it's moving in. And the reason that came to mind under the umbrella of this conversation is I'm curious whether you believe that safety and improving the safety of the sport falls within the scope of creating rules that really allow for that, or if it's, way beyond what a rule book could accomplish.
It's interesting because I also have my master's degree in public relations. So I think I come at this from also a different angle. So just add that into the mix because, I don't have enough things to do.
Right.
But for me, safety protects our sport. And I want it to protect the individual as well, but a lot of that falls on rider responsibility. I do not at any point in time foresee a type of system where you're approved to go up a level because it's a huge liability. And I for sure would not sign off on a single human being ever, not even myself, because it's a huge liability issue. So for me, safety is an issue that every single person in this sport should be aware of and concerned about. Every single person should finish a round, cross-country round mostly, because that's where our biggest safety issue is, right? And they should go back and watch their video. And they should question how well they did. Honestly, was I this? Was I that? Safety, it can't always be regulated by rules. It can't always be regulated by minimum eligibility requirements because, I talked to a really good friend of mine about this a lot. It's a minimum eligibility requirement. Just because you've done your minimum eligibility does not mean you are prepared for the next level. And so it's really hard creating rules that can apply to the entire population because it might take me 10 trainings to be able to move up to modified, but Leslie Law can do it. He can skip it and go straight to modified, right? So it's not fair to regulate every single person to the exact same set of rules, but we're kind of having to move in that direction because people are getting their minimum eligibility requirements and thinking, oh, I got my MER, I can move up a level. You can't. You can't. You have to spend time. You have to practice and you have to feel prepared and you have to feel safe. And there's a certain level where the sport really becomes a professional sport. And it's very much public perception. These volunteers, a lot of times, they're people that have never sat on a horse and they discovered this somehow. And so we as a sport and we as a group of people have to be safe and have to practice safety in order to save our sport. And I really believe very firmly about that. I'm all for frangible fences. I think they're great. I was on the committee that helped come up with all the money. I'm all for the compulsory retirement rule and show jumping. I know a lot of people aren't. I've seen it in action and I'm thankful for it.
Will you describe it?
Yeah, so it's 20 penalties in show jumping. So 4 rails, 5 rails, 4 rails and a stop, 5 rails. And then you cannot move on to cross country if they run in reverse order or normal order, right? If cross country goes first and then show jumping, it's not, you get a CR. So it's not an MER. So I really believe that we can't regulate safety through the rules. We need people to be aware of what the sport looks like to the public. I really, truly believe that this sport, obviously, at its heart, we are climbing on prey, flight animals, galloping at solid fences, right? Let's just be clear. This is not intelligent, right? Like it's not safe. It's not safe to hack. It's not safe to anything. And so we have to be very conscious of how we're portraying our sport. I really do think that our sport is so much safer than the media portrays it to be. I know of horse deaths at, show jumping competitions that never make the media, but every single time something happens in our sport, it's splattered everywhere. I think that we need to do a better job of protecting ourselves. And so that's how I feel about safety. I'm really, really adamant about it. I'm conscious of it. And I implore everybody on this video to just think about what it means for our entire sport.
I love that. And talking about MERs in that way is so productive too. Like, none of us are Leslie Law, and that's okay. And
look, I've picked Leslie up off the ground a few times,
right?
Like,
yeah.
None of us are infallible,
right?
Leslie's, I pulled him up out of the water. Like, I've pulled Joe Meyer out of the water, pulled Kyle Carter out of the water. John, I've probably pulled you out of the water.
Everyone goes in the water now and then.
Everybody goes in the water, John. Everybody goes for a swim. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how good you are. You're going to fall off. And we just have to be safe about it. We have to do the best that we can as individuals for our sport.
And there has been overwhelming consensus. We're on the 120 something episode of Ask an Expert. There's overwhelming consensus about when is the right time to move up. And I mean, the quote that I think more than one person has used is it's better to move up a year late than a day early.
100%.
There's I get why people get eager to do it, but also
yeah, I get it.
We're all proud of you at whatever level you're at, and you should.
I've moved up too fast.
Yeah,
it
can be tempting.
Yeah, it's easy. You just enter.
Right. Once you have those requirements, but that's great. So everybody take that responsibility on themselves, please. And I'm so stressed because we only have a couple minutes left. One question I want to make sure I ask you is if there was one thing that you could make sure every competitor at your upcoming events knew going into the competition, what could it be? And or what would it be? And that it can be anything. Like it can be a serious thing or a silly thing. Maybe it makes your job easier. Maybe it makes their life easier.
I think for me is whether I'm an organizer or a TD or whatever, if I'm there in a capacity, I want everybody to feel comfortable coming to me with questions. And whether that's a bit question, it doesn't matter. If people have a question, I personally want to be approachable enough that anybody can approach me. I think I'm the right age too, where like the younger people feel comfortable and the older people feel comfortable. I think it's different when there's an older TD that's, grizzled and been around the block a few times. They might be more intimidating, but my job as a TD and an organizer is to be there for you. I am there for you. You're there for me, but I'm there for you. And teamwork to me is such a big thing. And I just want everybody to feel that we're all in this together, because I organize so that you can compete. I'm not out here making a boatload of money organizing horse shows or teating. I promise you, I live in an RV. Okay. I don't have a palace. I live in an RV. And so that's something that's really important to me, is we're all here as a team. We're all in this together for our sport. And I want to be able to be approachable. And if anybody needs anything, I'm here. I'm sure everybody on here has my phone number.
Yeah. Well, you are so wonderful. And on behalf of everybody listening and everybody in this sport, thank you for everything that you do.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to do it.
In every capacity that you're contributing, and also encouraging people to contribute. Like, I love that you're helping to encourage people to become TDs. I know that you are a big fan of getting people involved as volunteers, which if anybody's listening and hasn't been a volunteer yet, just take this as your invitation to do that, because it really makes the shows possible. And on a final note, I encourage you to also, I know you loved this episode. If you haven't listened to episode 84 with Emily, listen to that too, because they tie together and there's a lot to learn. So with that, I have taken the full hour and 1 minute, and it was still not enough, but I learned a ton, and really appreciate you taking the time, and just appreciate you in general.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to do this. I'm happy to talk about it. Clearly, I'm passionate about it. And like I said, we're all here for each other. So I'm happy to do it.
Thank you so much, Emily. And thank you, everybody who tuned in and who's listening. Have a wonderful rest of your week.